I walked into my own building at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, badge in hand, ready for another day of watching strangers dismantle everything I'd built. The security guard, poor Gary, who always looked like he'd just finished crying into a bag of Cheetos, gave me that apologetic nod he'd perfected over the past 6 months. He knew what was coming. Hell, we all did. My name is Emily Thatcher. And at 38, I've learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in business is trust a handshake when you should demand a signature. 9 years ago, I was nobody, just another broke dreamer in a moldy St. Louis apartment, surviving on ramen and stubbornness. Today, I was about to become something else entirely. But let me back up. 9 years ago, I wasn't Emily Thatcher. CEO, I was Emily Thatcher. Unemployed data analyst with a psychology degree I couldn't afford and a laptop held together with electrical tape and prayer. My apartment in the Del Mar Loop district had water stains on the ceiling that looked like abstract art. Assuming you tilted your head just right and squinted through the desperation. I'd been laid off from a market research firm that specialized in consumer sentiment analysis, which was a fancy way of saying they paid people minimum wage to read angry Yelp reviews and categorize them by emoji. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was analyzing other people's feelings while my own ranged somewhere between existential dread and caffeinated panic. That's when the algorithm happened. I wasn't trying to revolutionize anything. I was just tired of manually sorting through thousands of customer feedback forms for a freelance gig that paid barely enough for groceries. So I started coding. 3 months of 18-hour days, fueled by gas station coffee and the kind of determination that only comes from having exactly $247 in your checking account. The breakthrough came at 3:17 a.m. on a Thursday. I'd been wrestling with natural language processing models, trying to teach a computer to understand not just what people were saying, but how they felt when they said it. Then it clicked: emotion isn't just about the words you use, it's about the spaces between them. The pauses, the repetitions, the way someone types fine versus fine versus fine. I called it Emoticore, and it could analyze emotional sentiment with 94.7% accuracy. Not just positive or negative, it could detect frustration, excitement, disappointment, sarcasm, hope. It could tell you if a customer was angry but willing to give you another chance, or happy but about to cancel their subscription anyway. Within 6 months, I had 3 clients. Within a year, I had 30. Within 3 years, I had an office above a sandwich shop and 2 employees who believed in the vision as much as I did. By year 5, Emoticore was processing sentiment analysis for Fortune 500 companies, helping them understand their customers in ways they'd never imagined. We weren't just a software company, we were emotional cartographers, mapping the invisible landscape of human feeling in the digital age. That's when Orion Edge Partners came knocking. Dylan Kerr walked into my office on a Tuesday in March, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car and carrying a confidence that suggested he'd never been wrong about anything in his life. He was followed by Sienna Marks, who introduced herself as head of brand strategy and digital transformation, while somehow making it sound like she'd invented both brands and digital transformation herself. Emily, Dylan said, settling into my second-hand office chair like he already owned it. We've been watching what you've built here. It's impressive. Really impressive. Sienna nodded, pulling out an iPad that she held like a sacred artifact. Your emotional intelligence algorithms are exactly what the market needs right now. We see tremendous synergies with our existing portfolio. I should have walked away right then. Anyone who uses synergies in casual conversation is either selling something or about to steal something. Usually both. But they had numbers, big numbers, and they had promises, bigger numbers. We want to invest, Dylan continued, but not just money. We want to invest in you, your vision, your team. We believe in maintaining the entrepreneurial spirit that made Emoticore special. They offered me a deal that sounded almost too good to be true. Sell them the company for $1 in exchange for equity, a guaranteed position as chief product officer, and a significant ownership stake in the combined entity. They'd provide the infrastructure, the resources, the connections to take Emoticore global. Think of it as a partnership, Sienna said, her smile bright enough to power a small city. You keep doing what you do best, creating amazing technology. We handle the business side. The contract was 847 pages long. I spent 3 weeks reviewing it with Max Delaney, the scrappiest lawyer in Missouri, who worked out of a converted garage and charged reasonable fees because he believed in what I was building. Most of this is standard, Max said, flipping through page after page of legal jargon. But there's something interesting in Section 17B. He pointed to a clause buried deep in the termination provisions. In the event that the principal seller is terminated without cause or constructive dismissal occurs, the principal seller retains the right to repurchase the entire company at the original sale price within 30 days of termination notice. So if they fire you without a valid reason, Max explained, you can buy the whole thing back for $1. I laughed. That's never going to happen. They need me. The algorithm is literally built into my brain. Max shrugged. Probably not. But it doesn't hurt to have it in there. Famous last words. I signed the contract on a Friday afternoon in April, and by Monday morning, I was Chief Product Officer of Emoticore, a subsidiary of Orion Edge Partners. The first few months felt like validation. They kept their promises: better office space, bigger budgets, access to enterprise clients I never could have reached on my own. But slowly, things started to change. It began with the meetings. Dylan started scheduling strategic alignment sessions where we'd spend 3 hours discussing brand positioning and market penetration strategies. These sessions always concluded with decisions that made Emoticore a little less like the company I'd built and a little more like every other generic tech firm in the portfolio. We need to think about scalability, Dylan would say, usually while gesturing at a PowerPoint slide that somehow made my life's work look like a bar graph. Sienna was worse. She had a talent for taking simple concepts and wrapping them in so much corporate speak that they became meaningless. She once spent 45 minutes explaining why we needed to leverage our core competencies to maximize stakeholder value through strategic brand realignment, which, as far as I could tell, meant changing our logo. The R&D budget was the first casualty. We need to focus on proven revenue streams, Dylan explained during a quarterly review. Innovation is great, but profitability is better. Then came the layoffs. Right-sizing the organization. Sienna called it 12 people who'd believed in the vision, who'd worked late nights and early mornings to build something meaningful, suddenly became redundancies. I watched my company transform into something I barely recognized. The Emoticore algorithm still worked better than ever, actually, but it was being packaged and sold like a commodity. The human element, the understanding that technology should serve people rather than the other way around, was disappearing behind spreadsheets and profit margins. 6 months after the acquisition, I was still Chief Product Officer. But it was becoming increasingly clear that my opinion was considered more of a formality than a necessity. Decisions were made in meetings I wasn't invited to, implemented by people who'd never written a line of code, and justified with metrics that measured everything except what actually mattered. That's when I started reviewing the contract again. Section 17B was still there, buried on page 247, unchanged and legally binding. According to the terms, if I was terminated without cause and constructive dismissal was specifically defined to include scenarios where my role was fundamentally altered without my consent, I could repurchase the entire company for $1. I called Max. You want to, what he said, and I could hear him shuffling papers in the background. I want to know if Section 17B is still enforceable. Emily, that clause was designed to protect you in an extreme scenario. Are you seriously considering? Just tell me if it's legal. Max sighed. I'd need to review the current corporate structure, but technically, yes. If the conditions are met, the clause should still be valid. Why are they planning to fire you? I looked around my office, the one with Dylan's motivational posters and Sienna's synergy charts covering the walls where my engineering whiteboards used to hang. Let's just say I want to be prepared. Over the next month, I quietly gathered everything I needed. I had the contract printed and bound, with Section 17B highlighted in yellow. I wrote out a check for $1, yes, an actual paper check, because the symbolism mattered. I kept both documents in my desk drawer, ready. The invitation came on a Wednesday afternoon. Strategy session, conference room B, Thursday, 4:30 p.m. No agenda, no context, just my name and Dylan's in the attendee list. I knew what it was. Everyone knew what it was. 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday was corporate code for, "We're about to ruin your weekend and possibly your life." Companies never delivered good news at 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday. I arrived at conference room B at exactly 4:30, carrying nothing but a notepad and the kind of calm that comes from being completely prepared for the worst. Dylan was already there, along with Sienna and someone I didn't recognize, a severe-looking woman in a black suit who introduced herself as corporate counsel. "Emily," Dylan began, "thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." I sat. "This is never easy," he continued, consulting a piece of paper that had clearly been prepared by a team of consultants who specialized in delivering bad news with maximum corporate politeness. "Over the past several months, we've been evaluating the strategic direction of our technology portfolio, and we've made some difficult decisions." Sienna nodded solemnly, as if they were discussing a terminal diagnosis rather than a hostile takeover. "The market has evolved," Dylan continued. "Our clients are looking for different solutions, and we need to restructure our approach to meet those needs. Unfortunately, that means we'll be eliminating the Chief Product Officer position, effective immediately." He slid a folder across the table. "Your severance package is quite generous: 6 months' salary, continued health benefits, and a positive reference for future opportunities." I opened the folder and pretended to read the documents inside, though I already knew what they contained. Standard corporate termination paperwork, designed to make the whole process feel inevitable rather than personal. "We want you to know," Sienna added, "that this decision reflects market conditions, not your performance. You built something amazing with Emoticore. We're just taking it in a different direction." The corporate counsel spoke for the first time. "We'll need you to return all company property and access credentials by close of business today. Security will escort you to collect your personal items." I closed the folder and looked up at the three faces staring back at me. Dylan with his practiced sympathy, Sienna with her LinkedIn-optimized concern, and the lawyer with her professional detachment. "I understand," I said. And I did understand. I understood that they thought they were very clever. I understood that they believed they'd successfully extracted everything valuable from my company while discarding the inconvenient human element. I understood that they had no idea what they'd just triggered. "Thank you for the opportunity," I added, standing up. "It's been educational." Gary, the security guard, was waiting outside the conference room, looking even more miserable than usual. "Sorry, Emily," he mumbled as we walked toward my office. "You know I don't like doing this part." "Don't worry about it, Gary. Just doing your job." I packed slowly, making sure to take my time with each item: the framed photo of my team from our second anniversary party, the coffee mug that said, "World's okayest algorithm designer," the small succulent plant that had somehow survived 3 years of my sporadic watering schedule. Dylan and Sienna watched from the hallway, probably calculating how quickly they could repurpose my office space. They looked satisfied, relieved, even. The last inconvenient reminder of Emoticore's independent origins was finally being removed. I saved the contract and the check for last, sliding them into my bag while Gary pretended not to notice. "All set?" he asked. "All set." The elevator ride to the lobby was silent, except for the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys. Gary walked me to the front door, his keys jangling with each step. "You take care of yourself, Emily," he said as I handed over my badge. "You too, Gary." I walked to my car, drove home to my apartment, a much nicer apartment than the moldy one where Emoticore was born, and poured myself a glass of wine. Then I called Max. "They fired me," I said. "Jesus, Emily. I'm sorry. Are you okay?" "I'm great, actually. Can you be at your office early tomorrow morning? Why? We're going to send a letter, Friday morning, 8:30 a.m. sharp. Max and I sat in his garage office, drafting the most important piece of correspondence of my career. It was beautifully simple. Dear Mr. Kerr and Ms. Marks, please find enclosed a cashier's check in the amount of $1.10, representing full payment for the repurchase of Emoticore, LLC pursuant to Section 17B of the Purchase Agreement dated April 15, 2016. As of the date of this letter, I'm exercising my right to repurchase the company following my termination without cause on June 14, 2024. Please acknowledge receipt and arrange for the transfer of all corporate assets, intellectual property, and operational control to me within the time frame specified in the contract. Sincerely, Emily Thatcher, former Chief Product Officer, current owner. Max hand-delivered the letter on Monday morning at 9:15 a.m. Walking past Gary, who definitely knew something was up, and riding the elevator to the executive floor with the confidence of someone carrying a legal nuclear weapon. I waited. Dylan called me at 11:30. Emily, what the hell is this? It's a letter, Dylan. I thought you might recognize the format, given your extensive business experience. This is ridiculous. You can't buy back a company for $1. That's not how business works. Actually, that's exactly how business works when you sign a contract that says that's how business works. We'll fight this. Our lawyers will. Your lawyers will do what? Exactly argue that you didn't mean the contract you signed. Good luck with that. I hung up. Sienna called me at 2:45. Emily, let's be reasonable here. We can work something out. Maybe there's a role for you in the new structure. Sienna, I appreciate the offer, but I already have a role. I'm the owner. You can't be serious about this. I'm dead serious, as serious as a $1 check. I hung up. The corporate counsel called me at 4:20. Ms. Thatcher, this is Margaret Sullivan from Orion Edge Partners. We need to discuss your recent correspondence. Hi, Margaret. What's to discuss? The contract provision you're citing is unenforceable. It was clearly intended as a symbolic gesture, not a literal. Margaret, I'm going to stop you right there. I've already had my lawyer review the entire contract. Section 17ZB is clear, specific, and legally binding. If you disagree, you're welcome to file a motion, but we both know how that's going to end. She was quiet for a long moment. The company has been restructured since the original acquisition. The corporate entity you're attempting to purchase may not what still exist. That's interesting because I'm still receiving dividend payments from my shares. Hard to get dividends from a company that doesn't exist. Another pause. We'll need time to review the corporate structure and determine the feasibility. You have 30 days from the date of my termination, as specified in the contract. After that, the option expires. Today is day 4. Ms. Thatcher. 26 days, Margaret. I'd start making those calls. I hung up. The beautiful thing about contract law is that it doesn't care about your feelings, your intentions, or your business plan. It only cares about what you agreed to in writing. And in writing, Orion Edge Partners had agreed that if they fired me without cause, I could buy back my company for $1. They'd fired me without cause. I had $1. The math was pretty simple. By Wednesday, my phone was ringing constantly. Reporters, investors, former employees, curious strangers who'd heard about the woman who bought back her company for $1. I started getting friend requests from people I'd never met, LinkedIn messages from venture capitalists, and interview requests from tech podcasters. The story was spreading. Emoticore founder exercises nuclear option, read the headline in TechCrunch. The dollar buyback that shocked Silicon Valley was Forbes' take. Someone on Twitter started calling me the Dollar Queen, and the hashtag #contract revenge was trending. Meanwhile, Dylan and Sienna were learning what it felt like to be on the wrong side of a viral business story. Their carefully curated LinkedIn profiles were suddenly attracting comments from people who wanted to know how you accidentally sell a company to someone for $1 and then fire them. But the real pressure was coming from their clients. Emoticore's algorithm was integrated into dozens of enterprise systems. Our technology was analyzing customer sentiment for major retailers, social media platforms, and financial services companies. These weren't clients you could afford to lose, and they were getting nervous about the stability of their emotional intelligence provider. I started reaching out to them directly. Hi, Jennifer. This is Emily Thatcher from Emoticore. I wanted to give you a heads up about some changes happening with the company. The conversations were remarkably similar. The clients had been happy with the technology but frustrated with the service since the acquisition. Orion Edge Partners had treated Emoticore like a commodity rather than a relationship business, and it showed. We've been thinking about looking for alternatives, more than one client told me. The personal touch just isn't there anymore. By Friday, 3 major clients had terminated their contracts. By the following Monday, 5 more had suspended payments pending clarification of the corporate structure. By Wednesday, Dylan was calling me every hour. Emily, you're destroying everything we built together. Dylan, I'm not destroying anything. I'm reclaiming what I built in the first place. The clients are leaving. Our investors are furious. You're sabotaging the company out of spite. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm exercising my contractual rights as the owner of Emoticore. You don't own Emoticore. Check your email. Dylan, my lawyer sent you the transfer documents this morning. I absolutely own Emoticore. Because I did. Margaret Sullivan had finally called back on Tuesday with the news that their legal team had confirmed what Max and I already knew: Section 17B was enforceable. Emoticore was still a separate corporate entity, and my $1 check had been legally sufficient to complete the purchase. I now owned, outright, the company I'd founded 9 years earlier in a moldy St. Louis apartment. The first thing I did was call Gary. Gary, this is Emily Thatcher. How would you like a new job? Emily, I thought you got fired. I did get fired. Then I bought the company. Long story. Are you interested in being director of security for Emoticore? Director of... Emily, I'm just a security guard. Gary, you're the only person in that building who treated me like a human being during the past 6 months. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you management material. Yanam, the second thing I did was rent office space. Not in the same building as Orion Edge Partners, I wanted a fresh start. I found a converted warehouse in the Arts District, the kind of space where you could write algorithms on the walls and nobody would complain. The third thing I did was call my old team. Sarah, this is Emily. How would you feel about coming back to Emoticore? Emily, I heard rumors, but I wasn't sure. Is it true? Did you really buy back the company? For $1, want to help me rebuild it? When do I start? By the end of the week. I had 7 of my original 12 employees back, plus Gary, plus 3 new hires who'd heard about the story and wanted to be part of whatever came next. We set up shop in the warehouse with folding tables, whiteboards, and the kind of enthusiasm that only comes from being part of something genuine. Our first team meeting was held around a card table with pizza and beer. I'd had Section 17B framed and hung it on the wall next to a whiteboard where we mapped out our strategy for the next 6 months. So, said Sarah, our lead developer, what's the plan? I looked around the room at faces I'd missed for the past 6 months, people who understood that technology wasn't just about code. It was about solving real problems for real people. The plan is simple, I said. We're going to build the best emotional intelligence platform in the world. We're going to treat our clients like partners, not revenue streams. We're going to innovate without asking permission. And we're going to prove that doing business with integrity isn't just morally right, it's also more profitable. And if Orion Edge tries to compete with us, asked Marcus, our data scientist, I smiled. Let them try. They have the brand name, but we have the algorithm. They have the corporate infrastructure, but we have the relationships. They have the investors, but we have the vision. Plus, added Gary from the back of the room, they really don't know how to pick their battles. The room erupted in laughter. Over the next 3 months, we rebuilt Emoticore from the ground up. Not just the technology, though we did make significant improvements to the algorithm, but the entire culture and approach that had made us successful in the first place. We hired slowly and carefully, looking for people who shared our values rather than just our technical needs. We treated every client interaction as an opportunity to demonstrate why personalized service mattered. We invested in research and development, not because it was required, but because innovation was part of our DNA. And we watched Orion Edge Partners struggle. Without the EmotiCore algorithm and without the relationships we'd built over years of careful work, their emotional intelligence division was essentially worthless. They tried to develop competing technology, but emotion recognition isn't something you can reverse engineer from a PowerPoint presentation. Dylan reached out one more time in September. Emily, this has gone far enough. We're prepared to offer you a settlement, a substantial settlement. Dylan, I don't want your money. I want my company, which I already have. You're being unreasonable. I'm being contractual. There's a difference. The investors are threatening to pull funding from our entire portfolio. That sounds like a management problem. Emily. Dylan, let me ask you something. In all your strategic planning sessions and brand alignment meetings, did you ever actually try to understand what made EmotiCore special? Of course we did. We ran extensive analyses. No, Dylan, you ran spreadsheets. You never understood that our clients didn't buy our software because it was technically superior, though it was. They bought it because we understood that emotion is fundamentally human, and technology should enhance humanity rather than replace it. That's very philosophical, Emily. But business is about relationships, Dylan. Always has been. You forgot that. And now you're paying the price. I hung up for the last time. By December, EmotiCore 2.0 was processing sentiment analysis for more clients than we'd ever had before. We developed new applications for healthcare, education, and social services areas where understanding human emotion could genuinely improve people's lives. I was invited to speak at StartupCon 2025, the biggest entrepreneurship conference in the Midwest. The irony wasn't lost on me that Dylan had been scheduled as the keynote speaker until his company's dramatic collapse made him somewhat less inspiring as a business leader. I walked onto the stage at the St. Louis Convention Center on a Friday morning in January, 9 years and 8 months after I'd written my first line of emotional analysis code in my moldy apartment. The audience was a mix of entrepreneurs, investors, corporate executives, and curious observers who'd heard about the woman who'd bought back her company for $1 and wanted to see what all the fuss was about. My name is Emily Thatcher, I began, and I want to tell you about the most expensive dollar I ever spent. I told them about the apartment with water stains that looked like abstract art, about 18-hour coding sessions fueled by gas station coffee and desperation, about the moment when I realized that emotion isn't just about the words you use, but about the spaces between them. I told them about the acquisition that felt like validation but became a slow-motion betrayal, about watching my life's work get transformed into something I barely recognized. And I told them about Section 17B. They thought they were buying my technology, I said, pulling the actual $1 check out of my pocket and holding it up to the audience. But what they actually bought was a lesson in reading contracts carefully. The audience laughed, but I could see some of the corporate executives in the front row shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The beautiful thing about contract law, I continued, is that it doesn't care about your business plan or your profit projections or your PowerPoint presentations. It only cares about what you agreed to in writing. And in writing, they agreed that if they fired me without cause, I could buy back my company for exactly this much. I held up the check again, and someone in the audience started applauding. The applause spread until the entire auditorium was on its feet. But here's what I really learned, I said as the noise died down. Success isn't about building something so valuable that people want to buy it. Success is about building something so meaningful that people want to be part of it. Technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. And if you really remember that no contract clause in the world will ever be able to take away what you've built. My phone buzzed as I left the stage. A text from Max. Final board resignation submitted. It's done. Orion Edge Partners had officially dissolved their acquisition of EmotiCore. I was no longer the woman who'd bought back her company for $1. I was just Emily Thatcher, CEO of Emoticore, building technology that helped people understand each other a little bit better. They thought they could erase me from the story with a termination letter and a security escort. But they forgot that I wasn't just an employee, I was the author of the first chapter. And now I was writing the ending, one line of code and one satisfied client at a time. The dollar check is still framed on my office wall, right next to Section 17B, and a photo of our team celebrating our first $1 million month post-buyback. Visitors always ask about it, and I always tell them the same thing. That's the most expensive dollar I ever spent, and the best investment I ever made. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting everything back, plus interest. Plus the satisfaction of knowing that they handed you the tools to do it themselves. They gave me a termination letter. I gave them a master class in contract law. They thought they were buying my company. I let them rent it for a while. In the end, they learned an expensive lesson about reading the fine print. And I learned an invaluable lesson about never underestimating the power of a well-written contract and a $1 bill.